Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we are going to paint the Seaside Meditation. Also, stick around until the end of the video so you can find out how you and 2 other friends can win a Frederick's canvas pad like the ones that you see me using. Before we get started, make sure you check out the video description below for a list of materials that I've used to make this painting, as well as a link to the reference image. And then hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so that you can paint with me every week. Now let's get started. Today, again, I'm using my Frederick's canvas pad, 12 by 16 inch. And if you're not familiar with this is not a sheet of paper. This is an actual sheet of canvas, just like what you get on a stretched canvas. It just comes in a tablet-like paper. And if you are familiar with these and you've ever wanted to try them, stick around until the end of the video because I will be giving away a whole slew of these Frederick's canvas pads. Now, just for a little extra stability today, I've got an old canvas here on the back of it. Now I'm using this as kind of a general reference image. I'm not going to be trying to duplicate this image exactly. Basically, I'm taking some information from it that I really like, and the rest of it is just going to come from me. So the things that I like are, the basic elements. I like the cloudy sky, the ocean, the old driftwood, and the balanced rocks. I like kind of the feeling that I get from these colors. Other than that, I'm going to do it just however I feel like doing it at the moment. And what I want to do to start is sketch out the composition. So to do that, I'm going to use my 1/2 inch angle, but whatever you're comfortable with sketching is perfectly fine. I wet it really good in my jar, and I'm just going to get a little bit of paint. This is Payne's Gray. It doesn't matter. Whatever color you want to sketch with. My only suggestion is to either have it be a color that's going to be predominant in your painting, or at least a color that you're okay showing if it happens to show. It doesn't matter what the color is. So I'm going to start by sketching in my horizon where the water meets the sky. I'm going to kind of go the top 2/3-ish mark, somewhere in there. I'm going to have my water meet the driftwood, maybe, let's see, maybe right in here. You don't have to be worried about any of these lines. Please don't feel like, if you get a line somewhere that you don't want it, that you have to try and erase it somehow. That's not true. You don't have to. I'm going to make just kind of a general line through the center of where my rocks are going to be. That's right about where they'll all be stacked, somewhere in there. And I'm going to lose a lot of these lines as I start painting, and that's okay. Let's see. Just kind of finding where those rocks are and the shape. Can't make that one go off the edge, that's okay. That's why I'm using my paint pretty watered down here. Just makes it easier to cover later. I'm just going to try and give each of my rocks a little bit of a different personality and see how they overlap. They're not sitting on top of each other, like that. Visually they're overlapping a little bit, and that's going to make them look like they're resting on top of each other. See, this one ends down here, but this one ends up here. If I were to do a rock that ended, right on the bit of that one, right on the top point, it might look a little awkward. So I'm just going to take it in just a little bit. Maybe we'll have kind of a flat one here. And then we'll have kind of a round one there. That should be kind of fun. Okay, I'm going to go to my 1/2 inch flat brush now, and I'm going to start filling in the horizon. I do like in my image how I have kind of a bright glow here on the horizon. But before we start that, I want to talk to you about the colors that I'm using today. Today I'll be using two colors that you're probably not familiar with. I did use indanthrene last week, and you're probably going to see this one a lot because it's quickly becoming my go-to blue. But today I'm also going to be using Naples yellow and maybe a couple other colors you're not familiar with. But the thing about this is I want you to use what you have. These are not the right colors. Your colors are not the wrong colors. So if you don't have one of the colors that I'm using today, use what you have. So I wet my 1/2-inch flat brush in the jar and wiped it on the edge. And with my Naples yellow, I have a little bit of unbleached titanium white. So it's just an off-white. You can use titanium white if you want. So I'm going to start by pulling out just a little bit of Naples yellow. It's kind of a nice, soft pastel yellow. I think it's really close to a pale yellow oxide. And mix some unbleached titanium in there. Just get that nice pale color. And I'm going to start sketching it in here. I think I might actually want it a little lighter than that. So I got me a little bit of just regular titanium white as well. I'm going to mix up a heavier amount of paint. There we go. Both of those colors. And some titanium to really lighten it up. There we go. Good amount of paint on the brush. I'm going to take it just right into my rocks. That way I don't have to worry about, you know, making the rock the exact same shape and size as that little hole that I left. Changing that color a little bit more of the yellow, because the horizon isn't going to be the exact same color from side to side. It might have a little variation. Not too bad. Let's grab a little bit more titanium white. I didn't clean off my brush. Right here at the top, I'm just going to kind of sketch back and forth with the tip of the brush. If that Payne's gray is still wet and it picks up, that's okay. I'm not worried about that. We have a stormy sky up top there anyway. A little more white. Good, good. From here, now that I know the colors that I want and the feeling that I want, I have my composition laid out, I'm really not going to be using that reference image anymore. I think that's good for the horizon. Now for the stormy part of the sky, I'm going to go to my number 12 cloud brush. And I am using this brush dry. If I use it wet, I feel like it streaks the paint too much. And I'm going to be using the indanthrene with Payne's gray. If you don't have the indanthrene, ultramarine, you could use ultramarine. It's not quite as dark or pigmented, but the color is fairly similar. It's very warm. You could try Prussian blue. You could try phthalo blue, but I feel like phthalo blue would be way too green, but that's up to you. So I'm just going to pull out a little bit of the indanthrene, not a ton. I'm going to pull some Payne's gray in there because I want that nice stormy color. You could use Mars black. It's much stronger than Payne's gray, so be careful, but you could use it. I don't have a ton of paint on this brush. A little glob of white. Let's mix it in there and see how we like those colors. That's not too bad. That's a good stormy color. So let's go in here and just start laying it down wherever. We're not worried about making cloud shapes. Don't worry about making cloud shapes. I'm just worried about laying it on the canvas in places where I like it. That 1/2 foot pressure, so my brush is bending halfway. That puts down the paint and spreads it. That twirly tippy toe shape kind of digs it down into the canvas. I just picked up a little blob of white. Same thing. So we've got some variation, some lighter spots, some darker spots. Maybe just a little more Payne's gray. Always a different color every time I go back. typically I try to use colors, that I know that you guys are going to have, some pretty standard colors. But I've been experimenting with a lot of different colors lately, and it's a lot of fun, and it's fun to see how, different colors react with other colors. You get so used to, what colors you use to make green, for example, that sometimes throwing a different blue into the option, really, it can open up your creativity a little bit more. So, I probably will be using colors more that we don't typically use. But part of that also is because I want you guys to be really independent artists. That doesn't mean that, I want you to go out and just learn on your own. You can learn from me or from others. You can learn from anyone. But what it means is I want you to feel confident to make your own decisions. Like I said, there's not a right and a wrong. My colors are not the right colors. Your colors aren't the wrong colors. So I want you to be less reliant on, if I'm doing something a certain way and that's not comfortable for you, I want you to feel confident to make the decision to do it however is comfortable for you. Now I met up with that white. So I'm going to grab just a little bit of white. I'm putting that white right on the line. See that? It's right between where the blue meets that white. And my pressure is very, very light. I'm barely touching the canvas. But I am nudging down into that white as well. Don't be afraid to get down there. Get down there. And if that white is still wet, which I think mine is, it should blend. There. And if it doesn't blend, that's okay too. There's some heavy lines in that horizon there, so either way is perfectly fine. So anyway, I just want you guys to remember that you are always free to make your own decisions about how to do something, about what colors to use, about what materials to use. And remember that, there really are no rules. There are guidelines. There are things that will make doing things easier, but there's not really any rules per se. So, if I tell you, never do it this way or never do this, yeah, you can still do that. Make that decision. Challenge yourself to try everything you're told not to do. Or challenge yourself to try something you think you can't do or shouldn't do, or, just try everything you can. Don't be inhibited. Just nudging down into that white and yellow again. It's starting to dry, but it's still working. It's still blending a bit. Just got a little clump of that white. Just kind of scatter it there. Okay, I'll do that part across the whole, most of the horizon last, and I'll zoom it in so you can see what I'm doing there exactly. Still continuing just my mixture of panes and indanthrene, different variations of white. If you wanted, you could even throw in some of that unbleached titanium and, see what happens. See how it changes the colors. feel like we're getting some nice rolling clouds in there. What do you think? Good stormy sky. We haven't painted a good stormy sky in a while, I think. This is actually a reference image I've had in my pocket for a while now. And then I forgot about it. And then I was kind of digging through my reference image pile and came across it and thought, wow, well, that kind of suits my mood this week. I need something a little on the moody side. I'm not worrying about getting that blended there just now. I just took it down. I'm just picking up white really at this point. I'm just going to hit a couple of darker areas here and there. So I'm just going to get a bit of this darker color. Nudge that in. I could always go to my number 6 cloud brush. I may. Maybe not. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this sky. I kind of like what we have going on. All right, I'm going to go to my number 6 and let's work on the horizon here a little. I am just going to get a swipe of that blue on there. See that? It's not a ton of the paint. I just swiped in it, and then I'm going to kind of twirl and dig that paint down into the bristles. That's it. See, there's very little paint coming off. Then I'm going to get a little point of white. Let's come into here. I'm going to kind of drop that point somewhere. And then just with the tip of the brush, very little to no pressure, just kind of scrub it up into there. A little more white. And I can scrub it down into here. Just give the illusion of some kind of distant clouds. It hides the transition between the horizon and the sky, but also adds a little bit of depth. And if a hint of this blue comes off on there, that's okay, because those clouds might have a little bit of a shadow on them as well. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on my brush. But I might bring this down just a little bit farther. In fact, I'm going to grab just a little bit more of that blue. There we go. Now my white. Just get rid of that line. There we go. Almost done here, and then we'll move on. Just gonna get a bit over here. Before we move on, I think I do want to just kind of put a couple of touches of some lighter colors in the sky. I'm still using my number 6. Just a smear of those gray colors and my white. Particularly up here. I do really like that spot on the image where it's nice and bright, right up there in the corner. There we go. Maybe just a little over here. And I feel like I want to bring the horizon in the middle down just a little bit. Right here. See, you can change it. You're not stuck with it. You might need to let it dry. You can always come back and change it. Just the same thing with those little bits of white. Just kind of scumble them in. Just soften the transition there. Or you can leave a hard, crisp line to kind of say there's some seriously weighty clouds back there, and that's fine. Whatever you prefer. So the balancing stones are kind of a meditation symbol. They represent, a balance that we find within ourselves, a mental, emotional, spiritual balance. And so I want you to, try and find that as well while you're painting. Painting can be part of that spiritual and emotional balance. But only if you don't let yourself get frustrated and, trust yourself. I think that, we're all much more capable artists than we give ourselves credit for a lot of times. So trust yourself. Make changes where you feel like a change would be nice to see. And I am much happier with that sky now, so I think I'm going to leave it. Okay, let's do where our water meets our horizon. And I'm going to stay with my 1/2-inch flat brush. And I'm going to get some indanthrene. In the distance there, it's quite dark. So we're going to keep this quite dark. Indanthrene and Payne's Gray. However, I don't want this to blend in with the sky. I want to change it just enough. So I'm going to grab a little point of my Naples and throw it in there, because the ocean a lot of times has a little bit of a green, a little bit of a cooler color to it. I'm going to use a little matte medium, but you don't have to use matte medium if you don't want to. But see, it's just a slightly bit greener than what we've got in the sky. I'm going to use the tip of my brush and sketch out my horizon. If you want to use tape, clearly wait until it's completely dry, but you could do that. You could use a ruler, whatever you need to do to get a straight line. My line is probably going to be crooked because I'm painting around a camera. That makes it kind of hard for me. So I might have to make some adjustments. I'm just going to take it all the way across. That's actually not too bad. I think it's a little lower on this side. Okay, that's actually not too bad. Pretty dang close. We'll call it close enough. I know it probably looks kind of slanted to you because the camera's at an angle. I'm going to mix up more of that color. If you're using yellow oxide instead of Naples yellow, just be careful. It's a little bit stronger of a color. You want to add just a little bit less. And if it doesn't lighten it enough, because see, it did lighten my colors, just put in the tiniest speck of either white or unbleached. I'm going to start filling this in. All of these colors are kind of transparent, so we're seeing some brush stroke marks, but I'm not worried about that because this isn't my final color. I'm going to have, you know, some texture on top of it, so just worrying about filling in all of the little holes, all the little canvas specks. That's all I'm worried about. Right about there, I think I'm gonna change my color a little bit. Keep my yellow in there. I'm gonna start adding a tiny bit of white. Just a little bit. Just kind of scrub it in there. Maybe I'll put a little bit more white. That didn't change very much. There we go. It's kind of a wavy ocean, so we don't need real smooth back and forth. You know, you can scumble it a bit. I'm going to keep going. I use the matte medium here just because I like the texture it gives to the paint. It smooths it out, makes it a little easier to blend, helps keep it open just a little bit longer. But like I said, it's completely optional for this painting. I don't think there's going to be any part in this painting where I tell you that you have to use matte medium. Get some of that paint off my brush. A little extra white. I think toward the front there, I'm going to add just a tiny bit more of that Naples yellow. Just right in here. Just because that's a decision that I made, not for any magical reason. I'm just looking for that little zen space in my own painting. That's when I'm the happiest, is when I can just get lost in a painting and, you know, really not think about anything else, including, you know, any judgments about my painting. That zen place is free from judgment. It really is. And, you know, I know for myself, when I can paint free from judgment, I paint better. I'm happier with the outcome. I have a more enjoyable time, and I feel like I learn a little bit more. Okay, let's work on getting some variation into our water a bit again. So I have a color. It's just a color, nothing specific. It's just a variation of that color. And I'm going to find a place where I think it will be a little different than what's already there. And to me, it looks lighter than what's here. So I'm going to just lightly lay some of that in. I might have to let this dry. This paint back here is drying, but it gets sticky, and I don't want to like lift it off of the canvas. So I think I'm actually going to get my blow dryer and make sure this is all dry before we move on. Okay, I dried my painting and I mixed up a little bit of that kind of grayer color again, and I'm just going to lightly, I'm using very light pressure, start smearing it back here. I must not have dried it enough. There we go. Not going evenly from one side to the other, really just kind of saying that color exists there. And see, now I've got a little bit of a ridge where that could be a wave later. We can make that a wave. Let's see, I'm going to add a tiny hint more yellow, a little bit more white. And let's keep going through here. Throw a little bit more of that blue in there. I just picked up a little white with all that other color on my brush. A little bit of a darker color. Just pull the blue and Payne's gray in. Because down here our colors are a little lighter, so I'm going to get a couple spots that are a little bit darker that can seem like a nice shadow. There we go. I'm not going to get quite as crazy with my water as is in the image, you know, with all the little swirly breaks. We're definitely going to have some, you know, movement and texture from the little waves that are crashing in there, but it's also kind of blurred out in the image. And so I want to keep it kind of blurred in our image, because the waves are not the focus of the painting. You know, the rocks are the focus of the painting, so that's where we're going to spend the majority of our time. See how just that little bit of kind of scrubbed variation, a little back and forth, kind of helps build that wave, the movement in the water. Been asked for ocean paintings quite a bit lately, and I guess I didn't realize how long it's been since we did water, so I guess I figured it's time to do it. I cleaned off my brush, but I'm just going to get a smear of that color. It's just like we did in the sky, where I picked up a little smear of it so that my brush isn't clean, but I can still get a pretty clean white. And let's just kind of start laying in some of that. That might be too much. I'm going to wipe off quite a bit of that white. And just kind of sketch it in there. See that little back and forth sketchy motion? My brush is just touching. There's no pressure. It's not bending. Occasionally, the white can be a little bit heavier, a little bit stronger. Let me zoom you in there a little bit so you can see. So I have my little wipe of white on the end of my brush. And I'm going to come in here, no bending on the brush. And just kind of almost like zigzag it around. See that? The important thing is that everything is fairly horizontal. You don't want to do these, you know, up and down like that. That's not going to say waves. But little sketchy bits kind of back and forth are going to help bring the illusion of waves. keep those lines, particularly near dark lines, where you've got the dark and the light right next to each other. You're really going to get a sense of depth. See, so right here, I've got a little bit of a darker line. So I'm going to come in, I'll just kind of start over here, right to the top of it. Right to the top of that dark line. And that helps those dark lines feel like shadows to a little bit of a break. Let's get a bit up here where we had that dark line in the back. I need a little bit more of that dark color on my brush. And I wet my brush in my jar just a little bit. You want to keep your brush a little damp for this part. If it's too dry, then your waves start to look just kind of fuzzy. But if there's a little bit of water on it, you get a bit more of a blend, a little bit more of a look of a break. You can always come back later with some dark color if you get too much white or, you know, whatever. But still keep an eye on it. Stand back every few minutes and look at it to decide if you like what's going on. I'm going to get a little bit of a brighter white and just kind of pop a couple of areas. Okay, I might come back and touch up the water a little bit after we do the rocks. But for now, I think that's going to be about good on the water. Okay, let's block in the wood. And I'm going to use my 1/2-inch flat again. I have some burnt umber. And I'm going to get some burnt umber, some Payne's Gray, a little more Payne's Gray, a little unbleached titanium. This is kind of my go-to color for wood. Payne's Gray, burnt umber, and unbleached. Just kind of a loose mixture of the color. There we go. And I'm just going to fill this in. I'm not worried about where the rocks are. And we've painted wood several times. Wood is something that I love to paint. If you've never painted wood before, and I don't mean painting on wood, obviously. I mean painting an image of wood. If you've never painted wood before and you feel intimidated by it, I want you to get rid of that intimidation right now, because wood is really fun to paint and it can look like anything. It can, you know, it really can be any color. The grain can look like anything. It can be splintery. It can be, you know, it can be whatever you need it to be. All this is here that I'm doing is just the base color. It's all going to be different, you know, once we're done with it. I'm going to dry this wood real quick before we start the texture. Okay, let's do some texture on here, and I'm going to use my fan brush for this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to load my fan brush 50-50. So I'm going to take some black. This is Mars Black. See, I'm pulling it out and putting it on 1/2 of my fan brush. The other half, I'm going to go into my unbleached titanium. I did wet my brush in the jar, by the way. See, now my brush looks like Cruella de Vil. I'm just going to run it on the edge of the plate there just to kind of separate the bristles a little bit. I'm going to start somewhere just with light pressure and just kind of twist it one way or the other. Let's do that again. Always start your brush in a different place. That way you can get a variation of color, and see how I'm just kind of letting it drag and separate and do whatever it's going to do. I think I'm going to get just a little bit of this burnt umber in the middle there. I just have a mess of a brush. Start right there. See that? No reason to be intimidated by the fan brush. Just get in there and scrape some lines in. Doesn't matter what it looks like. Burnt umber and unbleached, just to fill in a couple of spots. I think that's a good start. All right, I'm going to go to my number 6 round, and I'm going to get some unbleached titanium. And I'm just going to come into here and kind of start laying it in wherever I feel like I need it. Just defining the top edge of that wood there. And I'm going to let it blend into the black a little if it wants to. Just kind of finding some texture in there. Run it down the edge there. This is, I think I said this is a ratty number 6, kind of an old one, because I scrub. So if you can see, I'm doing a little bit of scrubbing right now. That's how my brushes end up getting all ratty looking, but that's okay. Let me grab just a little burnt umber with that. Let me zoom you in there. All I'm really doing is just adding colors where I feel like they should be. You know, I've got a few places where I have some hard lines, be they black or the unbleached titanium, and I'm taking advantage of some of those, and some of them I'm blurring out. Like I blurred that one out. But see right here where I've got that black, and then I put the lighter color right on top. Now it kind of looks like maybe a crack in the wood. Maybe right there we're seeing into the piece of wood. That's all I'm doing, is just kind of creating those little illusions. I'm going to mix just a hint of that Naples yellow in there as well, I think. Just a hint of it. And let's bring a bit here. Kind of fade that out right there. That's what's going into the little recessed area. Just don't paint everything out. That's the only thing. Don't get rid of all of your texture. Leave some of those weird, hard edges. Don't blend all of your colors into oblivion. Just add some little points of interest. Make sure you stand back so you can see how that's coming along. And when you stand back, you may see little things in the wood that make you think, oh, that kind of looks like, a crack or a knot or whatever. And then you can come back and you can intentionally, increase that illusion of that crack or knot. Let's see, I'm going to get just a hint of the Mars black in that mixture there. Again, wood can look like anything, so there's no reason that you have to stress out about trying to make yours look exactly like mine. Just going to zoom you out there a little and keep going. I just grabbed a little white, pure white, a little black, but I have not washed off my brush. I'm just trying different little colors until I get something that I like. Right in here, it looks like there might be a knot. So I'm going to stick with that. Just throwing little interesting points of that Naples yellow. Right in here is where I feel like I see that little knot. So I'm just kind of starting to, accentuate the shape, going around the little area where I feel like I see it. I'm going to grab some black, just pure black. Get that little knot in there. See how my dirty brush insinuated little lines already on its own. I feel like a dirty brush does all of the work. That's why I don't like to clean my brush sometimes when I'm doing things like this. And just go until my brush is an absolute mess. And, if I feel like I have to clean it off, then I can, but I just really like painting with a messy, muddy brush. Not too bad. I feel like I'm almost happy with this wood. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it, but I like it pretty good. If you want a little bit more of an in-depth, lesson on painting wood like this, then check out the information iCard right up here, and that'll take you to a video where I did the same technique on some wood, but I feel like I took a little bit longer on it. I spent a little bit more time on it. I liked that interesting little ridge there, so I made it nice and bright white to catch a little bit more attention. I feel like I do need just a hint of some pure white, or at least close to pure white throughout here. So I'm just going to add a bit of it on these little ridges. I don't even remember what's going to be covered by the rocks at this point, and I don't care. I'd rather put attention into a little bit of detail that's going to be covered up rather than, not put the attention into that spot and then have it not be covered up. And now I have a weird spot that, should probably be covered up. Yep, I'm just going to kind of smooth out a couple little ridges over here. We'll get a little dark in here. And then we're going to move on. Remember, put your light values right up against your dark values. And that's where you'll get interesting things happening. If everything's just like a scattered, chaotic thing, then there's not a lot real interesting to look at. But see, light right up against dark, and that creates some depth and some texture there. All right, we are getting there. I can already tell I'm going to make some adjustments to the wood after the rocks, but I want to get the rocks on there first. So let's go ahead and start laying those in, and I'm going to use my 1/2 inch angle because that's what I'm comfortable, kind of drawing and filling in, but use what you have, what you like. I'm just going to grab different variations of my colors. So some brown, I think there's some black in there, some white. Maybe I'll throw some Naples in there. That's a good color to start with. And I'm just going to find that rock. I remember I had it going off the edge, and I still like that idea. So. Just be careful that you don't lose it in the wood. Let's see, I'm going to kind of use a little bit of a different color there, just so I didn't lose it. And I really still am just kind of mixing up random colors here. I'm not trying to do shadow or highlight or anything right now. The variation in my color is just simply because I mixed it a little different whenever I went back for more paint. Don't let this part feel monotonous to you. It could, because we have so many different rocks. But instead, maybe since this is a painting meant for kind of a meditative moment, maybe think about each different rock and, in a different way. Each one can represent something completely different to you. And in that way, you can make each rock look completely different. In fact, I'm going to put a little bit more black in this one. Just get a different feel altogether. Right now, they kind of look like potatoes. I'm pretty sure my rocks aren't going to look too much like potatoes when I'm done, but maybe, I don't know, we'll see. I'm going to go pretty gray on this one, just some black and white, but I still haven't cleaned off my brush. In fact, I'm going to go more black. I remember I had a very flat, kind of rectangular shape on that one, and I like that, so I'm going to keep that going. Remember to make them overlap. At least a little bit. I'm trying really hard to get shapes that don't look like potatoes. Of course, part of, what will make them look like a potato or a rock is the colors that I choose when we start detailing them. Oops. Shouldn't have tried to wipe that. Oh well. We'll just pull the corner of that rock out a little farther. There we go. And one more. Maybe we'll make this one a nice pale stone. Kind of bright. And I think I'm going to make it nearly circular. Let's flatten out the bottom just a little bit. There we go. Okay, we're getting there. Now I just want to let the rocks dry because I'm going to come back and work on some texture on them, and I don't want to make a muddy mess or lift paint. So I'm going to let that dry completely and I'll be right back. So I apparently wasn't paying attention and I didn't record painting this rock. And I know it still kind of looks like a potato, but I'm going to let it dry real quick and then come back and touch it up, get our shadow to agree with the wood. So we're going to wait on that and get started up here. But all of the techniques I used here, you'll get to see as we go through these rocks. So I am using my number 8 Filbert that's all puffy and old, and I affectionately refer to this one as Fuzzbert. It doesn't matter that the brush is a number 8 Filbert. All that matters is you want a brush that's kind of puffy. Something you can really get in there and, grind paint around, stab, scrub, dot, whatever, and get a lot of good texture. So let's start on this rock. And I'm going to make this one be a little bit on the gray-brown side. So I'm going to mix some of my burnt umber with some Mars black and some titanium white. I'm going to keep it a little on the grayer side. That's going to help avoid that potato look. All right. I'm just going to kind of start dotting it on. You can kind of swipe it down and then break it up. Don't go overboard and like scrub everything into oblivion. Let texture exist, I just picked up a hint of white on that brush. Just picked up a little bit of Naples yellow with my black. I'm not cleaning off my brush in between these colors. I'm just going from one color to the next. It's that messy brush again. Just a little extra bit of black on my brush, because it's going to be nice and dark right there. And I am going to have it casting a shadow on the rock beneath as well. But not until I'm done with that rock. I'm not done with the rock underneath. Let's get a little of that Naples yellow, a little unbleached. Still haven't cleaned off my brush. And let's get a little bit of a highlight up on this top portion. Again, I will have a shadow under this rock down onto this rock, but right now I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to worry about what I want this rock to look like, and then I can come back later and add the shadow in. Remember that you can go, you know, over these rocks as many times as you want and change them. Just don't overwork it. If you feel like something's not working out, you know, one color or one layer, then just stop. Let it dry, come back to it later. And really, I'm just going back and forth between all of these colors and just picking up whatever, you know, whatever seems to fit, whatever feels like what I want to see on that rock, on that spot, at this moment. Let's get a little bit more texture in there. Actually, a little black, a little burnt umber. Just make sure it's nice and dark on the bottom. Now I dunked my brush into the water. It still has some of that brown, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to mix the water in my brush in with some black paint. So it's kind of thin, but it's not running at all. And I'm going to take it and I'm just going to get really close to the rock and flick. Just get some of those little flicky bits of that black paint on there. Even if you can't see it real well, it's a good way to break up the texture. Just make sure you're nice and close to the rock, otherwise it'll splatter onto everything else. Now my brush is cleaned off and has a little extra water, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to mix it into some white. Again, it's not so liquidy that it's running all over the place. It's just a little wetter than normal. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not going to do these little splatters on all of the rocks, but I wanted to show you what I did on that bottom rock that you missed. Okay, I'm going to let that rock dry and we'll come back and touch it up in a few minutes. Let's move on to this one. Now this rock, to me, it's very angular, so I feel like it's a different type of rock, so I'm going to do it totally different. I'm going to use my 1/2 inch angle, and I think I'm going to get some Mars Black, and maybe actually the tiniest bit of Indanthrene, a little bit of white. Let's see, I feel like it's got a very flat, very angular surface up here. A little more white. Get a little bit of a reflection on there. A little highlight or something. Maybe there's some up here. Just kind of let the rock decide what it wants to be. And when you feel like the rock is telling you how it's shaped and where its highlights are, just go with it. Don't try to fight it. A little bit of black right there. A little more black, maybe a little bit more of that Indanthrene. The tiniest poke of white, just to keep it from being pure black. Tiny bit more so we have a little bit of a highlight here toward the front. Just little bits of white here and there. I am kind of scrubbing it in. See how I'm using the chisel edge and just kind of wobbling it back and forth. It gives you a really smooth but also still kind of choppy blend, which is really interesting, I think. And it's really good for rocks. So see, I can just lay down some of that and then kind of scumble back and forth with the chisel edge. And if you have a ton of paint on there, if you know that paint is really heavy and textured, then you're going to have a hard time getting any kind of a blend with that. So just make sure that, see, I don't have any globs of paint. Lay it down like that. See, that blending is like effortless and it's so good for rocks. A little bit more white. Little highlights. You know, it's either highlights or the rocks are wet and it's reflections, or maybe it's just different minerals in the rocks. Maybe it's just a white spot on the rock. So don't worry about, you know, if you're looking at it and thinking, well, that doesn't look like a reflection. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a white rock. Okay, I think that's good for now. I will come touch it up when I touch up the other rocks. This one feels a little sandstony to me, so I'm going to go back to my Fuzzbert, a little extra water. Mix it into the black. Whoa, that was a bit much. Just flick a few little black flicks into there. Or a lot of little black flicks. I'm going to get some brown and some Naples. And let's just see what happens here. That black is still wet for the most part. Some of it will smear in, some of it's dry and will get covered, some of it will still show. I'm just kind of blopping it down and then kind of moving it around with my finger. A little unbleached. Remember that rocks, like wood, rocks can look like a million different things. So you make the rocks look like whatever you need them to look like, whatever you want them to look like. There's not a right and wrong. I'm going to get a little bit of a darker color. I just mixed a little burnt umber and black. Just a little bit of a darker color on the bottom here. And I'll worry about the shadow when we're done. This one I actually kind of like already. I don't think it needs a lot, just some highlights and shadows that I'll do on the rest of them. So I think I'm going to skip that one for now. And this one on the top, maybe we'll just kind of make it kind of smooth. I'm just going to mix whatever I had on my brush into my unbleached, get a nice pale color. Ooh, maybe a little extra white in there. so we can get a nice bright top edge. A little burnt umber in that mixture. Light pressure to get it to blend. See these little tiny circular motions, kind of plops them down. Little tiny circular motion. A little more burnt umber with a hint of black in there. Still a little hint of burnt umber and black. Okay, I feel like we're almost done and I'm really liking the way that this is coming. What I want to do now is just boost the shadows and highlights on each of the rocks, and then I think I'm going to change the wood just a little bit. So let's do that first. We're going to kind of do it from the bottom up. Going back to my number 6, I'm going to get some unbleached. I feel like the wood needs to be lighter. The value is way too close to the value of the water behind. So just going to warm it up a little bit and lighten it some, particularly at this top edge here. It can be a little wobbly, it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. Make sure we make a distinctive edge between it and that potato looking rock. It won't look like a potato when we're done. I hope not anyway. Maybe it will. But you know, some rocks just look like potatoes. It's just the way it is. This is just a very thin mixture of that unbleached and Naples with a little bit of matte medium. But really, do you see the pressure I'm using? That's mostly what has to do with how thin this is coming off, because there's a lot of paint on this brush. But I'm just kind of dusting over it. I do think that matte medium would make it easier, so if you have the ability to use matte medium, this would be a good time to use it. Just kind of glazing some areas. I'm not going to lighten everything. I'm just going to overall make it a little bit lighter than it was. I just grabbed a tiny bit of white on my dirty brush. Just kind of dash a bit of that on here. And I think that is much better. We are really getting there. I like to save all of my, you know, the pops of shadows and highlights for the very end. It kind of feels rewarding to me, you know, that's where everything really seems to kind of fall into place, is when you do the shadows and the highlights. Just a little tiny bit of extra white. And then I think I'm done with the wood, except for the shadow. A little bit of black, a little bit of burnt umber, a little matte medium. And let's put our shadow in here. So right under our potato rock, and then we'll just kind of dash it out, just like I did with that lighter color. A little matte medium just to smear it. I know sometimes people are afraid to kind of scrub with a brush because it can ruin it, and so I guess I can understand, you know, not wanting to ruin your brush. But for me, I think, you know, brushes are replaceable, but getting my painting to look the way I want it to is not. So if I can't do it without scrubbing, it's more valuable to me to scrub and get my painting to look the way I want it to. I can always get a new brush. All right, that looks good. I'm going to keep that same color, and I'm just going to lightly darken the bottom of this rock, just right where it meets the wood. A little bit of black, little matte medium, little burnt umber. It's okay if you can't see right where it meets that piece of wood, that's all right. Very similar technique to what I did with the filbert here, where I'm just kind of like plopping it down and then breaking it up a little. Let that texture show, you know, if you get some canvas texture in there even, I think that's okay. Just kind of squidging around some of that darker color, a little extra texture. Can't hurt. Kind of using it like I do my cloud brushes there. Let's get a little tiny bit of the unbleached. There we go. Some white. We need our highlight in there. Clean brush, again, a little black, a little burnt umber. And a little bit of a shadow right up here. See how much easier sometimes blending, especially if you're blending into, or trying to make it look like you're blending into paint that's already dry. Little matte medium can be all the difference. That's all that is. And it just smears this paint that's wet and makes it super transparent and thin, so it looks like it's blending in to this dry paint. All right, potato rock number 2. Let's clean up this edge. It's a little fuzzy. Maybe I'll take a little bit of this lighter color there. There we go. Let's go nice and pale up at the top of this one. Really make it stand apart from the other one so they don't both look like potatoes. So just my messy brush, I just grabbed some of my whites. Get it along that edge, mush it, and start kind of doing that little scumbly thing. Little matte medium to get rid of those lines, and then we're going to have our shadow under there. If anything here is too light, we can kick that back. Very easily. So let's do that. A little black, little brown, still with my muddy brush. There we go. And our shadow. Maybe not that dark. I don't think I want the shadow that dark. So a little burnt umber, and there we go. A little unbleached, just to smear it out. This one's pretty close. I cleaned off my brush, a little black, a little indanthrene, because I kind of like that blue-black look. A little bit of white, just so it's not pitch black. And make sure my shadows are in there nice and dark. Let's get that same color right here. And a little more white into that mixture. Think about how rocks are shaped. You know, rocks, they're rarely very regular. You know, you might have a dip right in the middle of a spot, or a little spot that's just randomly poking out. And you can create that look just with where you put a shadow and a highlight. You know, like if you look on this rock that I'm doing, right toward the back, I've got a dark recessed area right here, and then this is brighter, so it looks like it dips in there and then pokes back out there. And you can create those just by putting your shadows and highlights in interesting places. I feel like this one's pretty close. I'm just going to get a little bit of my burnt umber, the tiniest bit of black, just to darken it a little bit. Just right here, right at the very, very bottom. I don't think it needs much more than that. some unbleached and just a little bit of some highlight right up in here. I feel like these top rocks are really about done. They don't need a lot. I'm sure you're glad to hear that because this video has been pretty long. Tiny bit of pure white. There we go. A little bit of a shadow under there, so I'm going to get some Naples and my burnt umber. Maybe a little Payne's gray too, just to gray it down a little. The burnt umber is so warm, and I want the brown, but I don't want that hot warmth that burnt umber does. This one is pretty dang close. Some unbleached, some black. Let's get kind of a darker color. We'll start with the shadow on the bottom here. This one feels very angular to me too, probably just from the brush strokes that I used on it when I was creating it. So I'm going to keep that going. Everything's going to be very angular. Lots of kind of hard faces on the rock. I love that all of these rocks look so different. And you could even, vary them more. If you decided to use a little bit of some different colors in each one. You want to make sure that all of your colors kind of agree and that they exist somewhere in the painting, already. You don't want to introduce like a bright red into the rock if there's not that red already somewhere else, or you just want to be aware of your color choices. But you can still absolutely get in there and do whatever you want to do with these rocks. Nice and bright right there. That's kind of facing our light a little bit, I feel like. We'll just darken the back edge a bit. We are in the last couple of brush strokes here. Let's go nice and dark on the top there because I feel like that's not taking a lot of direct light. It's above our horizon. Visually, it's above the horizon, so maybe the light that's setting is kind of hitting it toward the bottom. Let's pull this top this way a bit. Okay, and our top rock, I feel like it's pretty close as well. I'm not going to clean off my brush. Go into my burnt umber, my unbleached titanium, maybe a tiny hint of black. Let's just make sure that shadow is nice and dark, but not black, just darker than anything else on it, especially right here toward the back. A lot of times when you see me picking up matte medium here and I don't mention it, it's just because my brush is dry. I tend to use matte medium the way a lot of you probably use water. You know, if your brush seems dry and you think, oh, I need some more water. That's really how I use matte medium. Just use it in place of water. Get my highlight color. Make sure that's good. Clean brush, unbleached, a little bit of Naples, some white. This color is really mimicking the color on our horizon. And that's kind of nice. Okay. Overall, I am pretty happy with this, so I'm going to sign it. And there is your relaxing seaside meditation. I hope that you enjoyed painting this one with me, and I hope that it was a relaxing experience for you. Now, if you'd like to win your very own Frederick's Canvas pad, all you have to do is make sure that you follow both me and Frederick's Canvas on Instagram or Facebook, and then leave me a comment on the post for this painting and tag 2 of your friends. So that's it. Like me and Frederick's, comment on my post for this painting, tag 2 of your friends. And then this Sunday, July 14th, 2019, I will randomly pick 3 winners on Instagram and 3 winners on Facebook. And you and the 2 people you tagged will each win a Frederick's Canvas pad. While you're on Instagram or Facebook, make sure that you leave me an image of the painting that you did from this video, because I'd love to see how your painting turned out. A humongous thank you to my awesome sponsor, Frederick's, not only for providing me with the great canvas pads that I've been using, but also for being so generous as to give away so many of them to you guys as well. And I hope that you love them as much as I do. But more than anything, thank you to all of you for watching and painting along with me each week. I'll see you next time.